Fort in Cincinnati, Ohio, to an unmarried 16-year-old girl who never knew his father, and has once said that his mother traded him to a waitress in exchange for a pitcher of beer. Any guesses on who this boy might be? Right.
Helter Skelter.
Yes. After years of abuse and neglect and multiple incarcerations, he grew up to what we now know to be as Charles Manson. I've always been intrigued and fascinated by like murderers and serial killers and stuff. I don't know, it's kind of weird. But I always watch like TV shows and documentaries and read books about him and stuff. And I think he's especially interesting because he's kind of the most famous murderer ever maybe. But there's actually no proof that he ever killed anyone himself. So today I will be discussing the story of Manson and his followers, the Manson family, and the killing spree that they went on from July 25th, 1969 through August 28th, 1969, and the 9 victims that they killed. Manson is arguably the most notorious murderer ever in American history, so much so that his story still fascinates people 40 years later. At 13 years old, his mother put him into foster care where he was shuffled around to various boys' homes and juvenile detention centers, where he claims he was beaten and raped multiple times. Throughout his teens and 20s, he was in and out of jail for stealing cars and writing bad checks. So finally, at 32 years old, he ended up in San Francisco, and he went to the Haight-Ashbury district, which is kind of the hippie center of the universe in the 60s, and started to gain a lot of female followers, who later would be the Manson family. And so in 1968, he ended up in LA, and this is where he started prophesying his helter-skelter theories to his followers. Wikipedia describes Manson's helter-skelter as a race war that he predicted to happen between black and white races. This came from a Beatles song where Manson actually thought the Beatles were talking to him, and they thought that the Beatles were prophesying this race war also, and that Manson was going to be like the second coming of Jesus after the war was over. So Manson thought if him and his people could kill white people, blame it on the Black Panthers, that it would ignite this race war that he could then end up being the hero of. So in the summer of 1969, the Manson family brutally stabbed and murdered at least 9 people that we know of. There may have been more. The first of these murders was Gary Hinman. He was killed over money and basically kind of a drug deal gone bad. The next murders was the most famous. It was the murder of Sharon Tate. Herself and 4 of her friends were killed in her home. They were all stabbed to death. She was actually 8.5 months pregnant at the time. She was married to director Roman Polanski, and they were all, like I said, stabbed, and some victims even had up to 40 to 50 stab wounds just on themselves. Like I said, it was a really brutal crime. She was 8.5 months pregnant. They wrote on the walls in their blood the words war and pig, like to try to make it look like it was like a racial, like government kind of murder. The very next night was the LaBianca murders. It was the same kind of deal. It was a couple, a wealthy couple in LA. They were stabbed multiple times. There was writing on the wall, all that stuff. But Manson was actually not present at either of these murders, so he actually didn't take place in either of them. And then the final murder was a man named Donald Shea. Manson was afraid that he was going to rat out the Manson family for stealing cars. It actually took several months for the police to link the murders together, which is kind of weird because they did the exact same thing each time, but whatever. So Manson was finally put on trial in 1970. And according to a 2009 Time magazine article with the prosecuting attorney of the trial, Vincent Belosi, Manson got a hold of a sharp pencil in the courtroom and tried to jump at the judge and stab him. So he was finally convicted of murder, even though there was actually no evidence that he ever murdered anyone himself, and is currently today on death row in Corcoran Prison in Fresno, California. And to this day, he still admits that he did nothing wrong. An article entitled Charles Manson and Family by Carrie Sable quotes him as saying, "A lot of things I said and did affected a lot of people in a lot of different directions. It wasn't intentional, and definitely wasn't malice or a forethought." So he never admitted any wrongdoing, and still today he says he has nothing to do with any of it. All those people just did that on their own. So it's plain to see why the Manson murders were such a bizarre occurrence in American history. They were heinous crimes committed by really young men and women, mostly by women, really, and they came from just average American homes. And in a time of peace and love in the 60s, it was supposed to be everyone's supposed to be in love with each other, the Manson family wreaked havoc and made no apologies for it. Charles Manson was and still is a very smart, mesmerizing person who used his charm and intelligence to create some of the most infamous crimes in history. It's terrible that these incidences happened. However, at least he will forever be behind bars, and thankfully this is the kind of evil that we only see once in a lifetime.